we're making something in order to reflect ourselves. And like the deeper idea would be to make something because there's a deeper truth you need to tell. We can appreciate the music in the headphones and the singular experience. And there is like, I think, divine beauty and goodness to that. But we were meant, our bodies were created to sit around making music together in one room.
I don't know if any of this technology would even be functional or even have any sort of money-making capacity if it didn't rely on the stolen works of so many artists. It's unfathomable. Honestly, the greatest act of theft in all of human history. And no matter what the AI outputs, it's not gonna know like what's in my soul that's trying to come out, that I'm trying to like create the environment to release. And
Yes.
it doesn't know what's in me.
Yes.
My name is Simone Leone, and welcome to Meaning Making Machines.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I'm really excited to share my conversation with JoAnne Harris. JoAnne is an accomplished film and television composer, and she also composes for concert series. The reason I had her on today was to basically just have a conversation with her about the state of art, the state of music, and her religious life. I think we get into a really interesting discussion about what it means to be an artist, like why we choose to make what we make and what the purpose of it is as individuals and as a whole. We also get into what art is doing for AI and talk about some of the silver linings and also the dark side of it. I think this is my first episode of the podcast where I really get to talk to someone about the meaning of art. We've gone through a lot of other topics on previous episodes, and we get into art, religion, and technology, but I'm particularly excited to share with you our conversation about art. I'm also really grateful to JoAnne for being really open and honest and vulnerable with her true thoughts on all of these topics, and I'm really excited to share today's conversation with you. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. You're a musician and a composer, and I would love it if you just shared your musical biography a little bit, because I think you would better able to summarize your path better than me.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
So I grew up loving music. It was always part of my life. I remember now like learning piano at a very young age, and I would just like make up little things at the piano. And this is a slight criticism on my father, but it really wasn't that negative in actuality. But he would walk by and he would just like kind of put his hand on my shoulder and say, just think how good you'd be if you actually practiced the lesson. And I was like, but I don't want to practice the lesson. I want to like make up this little song. And so I had a whole like assortment of little songs. And my mom quickly figured out if she could get me to make up lyrics to the little piano exercises, I'd be more into that. Like I could somehow connect meaning to the music, and then I would play. And so I grew up just loving everything musical. I was in dance class. I played in band in high school and throughout middle school, and choir was a big deal. I went to Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota, to sing with the choir there, which has a very storied roots in Lutheranism. So there's sort of like an ELCA Lutheran group of choirs in the Minnesota, northern Iowa area. And so like I had applied to all of them, like Luther, St. Olaf. What's the one in... I'm blanking now on the others. Augustana, I think, is another one. But I really wanted to be part of that tradition. I grew up Lutheran. Singing in the choir was like the dream. And so I went there. I spent 2 years not being able to make the top choirs at all. Like I spent 2 years in the very lowest choirs that I could be in, which was at the time just like the most social scourge of my life. and musically too, because I really wanted to be making higher level music. But in a leadership way, it was great. I got to be the section leader of my smaller groups. I got to take part in leadership in broader ways, administrating the choir, and like really got some good life lessons and made great friends in those choirs. And so my junior year, I did make the Concordia choir. So I did this like crazy thing of making the leap from like the lowest choir to the highest choir. And so that was a transition, but a great one. And I just really enjoyed that. And our choral director would have me and a couple other interested students take kind of composition lessons with him. I never thought of myself as a composer. I thought I'm going to be a choral music educator, but I enjoyed learning the craft behind how things were written. And we'd sit in Dr. Klassen's office and we'd study Bach, and we'd walk away being like, oh, wow, this is so amazing. Like we got to learn this to like analyze this cantata with our hero, Dr. Renee Klassen, who was amazing. And anyway, so I learned a lot at Concordia. I loved it. I ended up applying for a job right out of college with the Young People's Chorus of New York City, which was not like my life goal. I was like, I'm gonna like stay in this like Lutheran bubble. I'm gonna like be near my parents. I'm gonna maybe like teach high school choir, marry a farmer. Like those things were all like very much in my worldview at the time. And this job came up, and I emailed Dr. Klassen, and I was like, do you think I have what it takes? He's like, yes, I know Francisco. He puts in a call. They fly me to New York City to interview for this job. And I'm like, to paint the picture, like I'm like 22 years old. I'm wearing like khaki pants and a jean jacket. Wow. And I'm like working with these urban kids in this choir setting. And I was so intimidated. I was like, these kids know I'm the whitest thing ever. It's not working. So I was just like, let's just have fun, because I'm definitely not getting this job. And so like by the end of the interview, I had them all singing like the Star Spangled Banner in 5 different keys at once or something. And we were all laughing and having a good time. And I left, and I was like, I didn't get this job. And I definitely did get that job. And I was like, wow. So I moved to New York City in 2006. And it was like my eyes were open to all of these musical possibilities. And so that's when I started like meeting actually more choral composers who were working with the children's chorus, and talking to them about their lives and kind of thinking, maybe this is something I could try. I ended up taking a year off to do some backpacking, and in that time really put music on a shelf. I was really just more interested in a friend and I from the chorus saved a small amount of money. Now it seems really small, but we were like, we're just gonna backpack through Southeast Asia, and we did that for half a year, and it was remarkable. And I thought maybe I was gonna be a writer at the time. I didn't really know what career path I wanted. I was just kind of soul searching then. Yeah. And I made my way eventually back to New York City and needed employment, and actually just found on Craigslist a film composer who needed an assistant. And I was like, well, I can get coffee. And that quickly turned into me learning the trade, kind of the old fashioned way of apprenticeship. And I sat on a couch behind my mentor, Chris Hagen, for a couple years, duplicated his tech setup so that I could ghostwrite for him on some projects, or also be equipped to take other projects of my own, or things he didn't want to do, or things that were too low budget for him. And that was really how I got started in more film composition. And through just being in New York City and meeting other composers, I think other doors opened up to me as well. I've been for the last maybe 6 or 7 years writing for Wind Band, which is just not something I ever thought I would do as a kid who grew up playing wind band. But I love it. I love the change of pace from the film TV world of execute this way, and sort of sometimes you're more of an artisan who's making wallpaper, as opposed to a canvas that's blank, that's more of your own giving. And students, I mean, kids who play in symphonic wind band are just the best. They're so creative and nerdy and weird and wonderful. And getting the chance then to kind of reorient in my mid 30s to like asking the questions like, what is my music for? Who is it for? How do I participate in it? And that was like a really amazing growth opportunity. So now I kind of do a little bit of everything. I do some teaching, I do some conducting for other people's film scores from time to time. And yeah, I still take on a little bit of TV and film work, but mostly now oriented more towards the academic wind band composition.
And like when you were starting to ask yourself those questions, like what is my music for? What is the purpose of why I'm making this? Like how do you even begin to answer that? I don't even know how any artist begins to answer that, but like what were some of the things that you were feeling when you were going through
Yeah,
that?
that um, community was the number one thing that drew me towards helping to start looking at that question in any way that I found meaningful. You know, I think part of the loneliness of being a composer is the amount of time you spend alone.
Yeah.
And really asking, like, is this computer screen in front of me the only mirror I have into the world? And being around more people, getting to do more concert music meant getting to work with ensembles, getting to show up and be with 60 or 70 people. And that was happening a little bit in my when I conduct for a film score, but that is such a different context of execution, not exchange. And I think with students, especially, their instructors are hoping to like teach them to be immaculately great performers and good musicians, but also understand the really good ones, at least understand like the responsibility of teaching them to be good humans.
Yeah.
And in that, like a part of my soul, I think that was yearning to remember
Hmm.
how to connect back and be a good human in community, learned right alongside them in that process. And so I think community is probably the first way that I really started thinking about that question.
And it's interesting too, you talking about your experience with like film and TV composing and having it just be wallpaper and I'm wondering, is that like a stylistic change that's been happening? Because I feel like if I watch anything that's maybe like 90s or earlier, the music is has such a personality. It's so in there, it's another character. It doesn't like I it's it's all of the iconic scores of the 90s that I grew up with. They're so memorable, like Harry Potter or Jurassic Park or things like that, where it's like it gave a voice to the story. And is it just that's what's happening nowadays? Like people just want like very minimalistic sound?
I'd be curious for your comments on this too as an actor.
Yeah.
Like I've noticed that just in general, there's a great insecurity in media. Nobody wants to do something that's gonna fail. And
Hmm.
so the instinct to just copy something else that's been done and has been successful, like we see it on Broadway too, of like the new productions that come out are typically like, oh, this is an adaptation of a movie. This is an adaptation of a book. This is a reboot of a musical we loved 30 years ago. Like the instinct to just be very like, we can't try something new. We don't have the time or the money for that. You know, we
Yeah.
need to turn a profit. I wonder if you experience that in your world.
Well, I mean, just by observing what is getting made, it's all sequels, reboots, adaptations, very much like focused on what's going to be safe and what's going to make a lot of money. And I'm not like I'm not paying attention to all the numbers, but when all of the things that they're rebooting now are things that were original or maybe an adaptation of a book that did great because somebody took a chance and somebody like tried to make something unique and original and then it's like it made a bunch of money because it was really good and it really resonated with people. And now every time I see like some post of like they're doing another remake of American Cycle, of Psycho, Devil Wears Prada, blah blah blah, like all these great movies that were not made with that in mind. And I think there's so many original stories. There's so much, and when original stories do end up getting made, I feel really just like so happy about it. Like somebody's taking a chance, they're allowing this to happen, and like yeah, it's really too bad. And I've read so many things about why this is. Like one theory is that Hollywood execs are the average age is much older than they were in the 90s. Like in the 90s, the average exec was like 30 or something, and like younger people take more chances. Who knows? But also streaming, blah, 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 the devaluation of art. So many,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I recently learned a new term. I wasn't familiar with this, but the idea of second screen entertainment, where
Mm,
like executives are banking on you looking at a first screen, and what you've chosen to watch in the background is your second screen entertainment. And there's like a very specific way to write this kind of show or
mm,
this kind of movie, knowing that your audience, you don't have their full attention. And that kind of just breaks my heart. And I
yeah.
suppose we've always had disposable entertainment kind of like that, maybe more so in television than in like, mainstream blockbuster films, right? Where the assumption is you're going to go to the theater and you're not
Mm,
going to pull out your cell phone because you don't have one. You're going to sit there with your buddies and you're going to watch this movie. You're not going to do something else. And
yeah.
so I don't know. It's just really it's an interesting time to ask, these questions that we're asking, like what is art? Couldn't we just rely on an assumption that something really good will make money?
Mm,
But are we beyond that as a society? Like, what do we think is good? Like,
mm.
do we have no general consensus of that? Why or why not? These are the bigger questions that I certainly don't have an answer to, but find it
It
an interesting time to be alive.
it's interesting and horrifying. And then I also try to like not fall into a negative swirl about it because I think this stuff also works in cycles. And I think of, I don't know, I'm like 1950s Hollywood. There was so much censorship and so it just like the art form hadn't fully developed and it got really great. And maybe we're gonna have some sort of romantic resurgence when people get sick and tired of having like crap shoved down their throat and art being so belittled. But who knows? I don't know. That's my dream.
Well, I'm gonna join you with like some like, can we find maybe a perceived optimism that will come with all the negative,
Yes.
bits of where we've landed here is that with great constraints and the intense need to tell a story, humans typically do thrive
Yeah.
under that kind of situation. Not that I'm saying I want for us all to be put under extreme pressure, but we feel it, right? Like I think the pressures of a country are like, more and more and more that like hopefully under that kind of circumstance, the artists have no choice but to say I have to do it this way and here's
Yeah.
why.
And I've had enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I so I don't have you ever seen the movie The Girl, what's it called? The Lady with Their Portrait on Fire? I think that's what it's called.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yes. Well, okay, I'm trying to remember that one. I think I watched it twice because it was so magnificent. This was like peak pandemic, wasn't it?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Beautiful movie, like 1700s France, I think.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
this lesbian love story. But there was the reason I'm bringing it up is there was this moment in it where one of the characters says, um, I'm going to church because I love the music. And they made it clear in the dialogue. I can't remember exactly what was said, but it suddenly dawned on me that is the only way that she can hear music. And the other girl who was more worldly said to her, like, have you ever heard a symphony play? And she said, no, I have no idea. What does it sound like? And so she was trying to communicate with her what a symphony sounded like. And
Yeah.
I just realized, wow, in that time, in that world, the value of music when you could only go someplace. You'd have to travel to some city to hear a symphony, or only way she could hear music is if she went to her local church.
Yeah.
And compared to what we have now with music, I mean, how like, I mean, what are your feelings about that as a musician? It seems like music in some ways has been crushed a lot more than many other art forms. And like, what has been your experience with that?
Yeah. I I agree with you. I'm also interested in following a thread, if you don't
Yes,
mind,
yeah, go, yeah.
about like the church's relationship to music and
Hmm.
how like intertwined that is still to this day, but like in a more unexamined form, I think. Where you're right, for so many centuries, the only way people heard music, performed music, or even learned music was in the context of the church. And so for, centuries too, that was the church as controlled by sort of the more royal consciousness of the state, right? But still, it was the church. It was the place where people went, and that like learning singing was important, so you could
Yeah.
participate
There was no
in
really
service.
like secular form of music, right?
No.
No, yeah.
Well, I mean, there started to be, and also in the theater too. So like, I'm not a historian, so I'm probably not the person to speak about this.
Okay.
But thinking about too the in a certain context, in the Western context, right? Like this was a prevalent way for people to express musical intent. Like I'm thinking of Bach and like his undeniable influence in literally everything anybody does now, even if they're unaware of it. He died still in the service of either a royal court or the church. I couldn't remember. He kind of bounced back and forth. But there was a point in his life where he was cranking out like a cantata a week for his church musicians who probably could not play it to the level we now like get to experience it. Because they like had a week with this like magnificent thing. They probably did not praise him. They probably weren't like, you know what?
They might
Oh
have been
my
annoyed.
gosh. Yes. They weren't like, Herr Bach, thank you so
Yeah.
much for this glorious thing from on high. They were like, really? Like, we can't play this. Anyway, but he did it anyway. You know, like that was his service to sort of the divine inspiration in him to like get it out there anyway. And I wonder too, like if we just have a weird relationship with that now. It's like people are in touch. I think musicians are in touch with the inclination to like get it out there now, to produce and to like and to make something, right?
Mhm.
But I'm worried that it's we're making something in order to reflect ourselves. And like the deeper idea would be to make something to glorify God, to make something because there's a deeper truth you need to tell. I think, yeah, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, I was like in our my last podcast episode with Grace, who's a medieval scholar, we were talking about that relationship to art, and it I think a lot of artists have a hard time with this, where you have to make your art all about who you are and your identity and your ego and your brand and all this stuff, where the natural impulse to create is, it doesn't need that. It doesn't need
yeah,
to feed on that. And that sometimes is like toxic actually to that natural impulse to want to create, and not to be good so people will praise me, to be good, to like glorify my creator and the world, and to just beauty for beauty's sake,
yeah,
essentially. Yeah.
yeah. And this is like one of those tenets of Christianity
Mhm.
that I find so interesting to hold. It seems like such a fine line, right, between what is it of me that God has created me to do specifically for I am me,
Mhm.
but then again, it's not of my own will that I make it happen, right? It's like the reliance on the divine will through me that creates a thing that people could love or people could hate. Or think again of Bach. Like he didn't get any of
Yeah.
the glory at the time, but he certainly does now. And that was his mission. Ostensibly, he would sign all of his pieces Soli Deo Gloria, like to God alone the glory.
Mm.
And that was his sort of spiritual formation in the whole process of creating anyway. So it is weird. It's like we know, like I think humans can inherently know something that is spiritually made. Like there's something in it that we all can recognize as good.
Yeah.
Whether it's like a dual lipid track that's like somehow been like mastered amazingly, right? And you're just
Yeah.
like, how did we think to do that? How did someone
Yeah.
sit at a computer and think to do that? That's so cool, right? Or like, it sounds so great in my headphones. Like, even if you don't have the words for it, you like feel it.
Yeah.
But then again, like, what's that slippery line between like, we did this all for ourselves, or we did this with the knowledge that we're trying to give something beautiful. We're trying to be prophets, with a word, for people about something beautiful.
Yeah, I think maybe this is the problem I sometimes have with some modern art or some avant-garde art, which I love, like some of it definitely, but in terms of like not centering beauty and just like something like we all recognize beauty when we hear it or we see it. And it's hard, yeah, like that feeling you get when you hear something and it just like everything just clicks and you feel it versus my mom always makes this like it's kind of a silly joke, but she's like, you should only listen to music that cows would produce milk to, because apparently cows produce the most milk if they hear classical music, and they get really cranky if you play them like heavy metal and
Oh
they
my
don't
gosh.
produce milk.
I did not know this. That's amazing.
It might be like one of her made up facts, but who knows? Maybe
I
I'd believe it.
I'm not opposed to this.
Yeah.
Like, that's such an interesting thing too. Like we're still learning so much about like, especially with recorded technology, and
Mhm.
that like the human body will respond to sympathetic waves if it's like sitting in front of the orchestra. Like if I'm
Mhm.
live with other people who have instruments, my body does different things than if I listen to zeros and ones. Even I think it's slightly different if it's just zeros and ones that were created by the computer or zeros and ones of a recording of a live performance. There's like some sort of different echelon to this. An audio engineering friend told me this, and who would be able to speak to this more precisely and academically. But I found that so interesting and so emblematic of like, again, just this bigger idea of community. We weren't meant. We can appreciate the music in the headphones and the singular experience. And there is, like, I think, divine beauty and goodness to that. But we were meant, our bodies were created to sit around making music together in one room.
Mhm.
And that, I think, it's worth asking those questions, and asking, like, do we cheapen our existence? And I can't, I, I don't know. This was the existence we were born into.
Mhm.
We don't know any other way. So at some point, it's like, well, I would rather have people enjoying music to whatever degree they're able, than not. So
Yeah.
I feel such a tug with my relationship to technology and how we use it.
I mean, do you think in some ways it would be better if I didn't have on my phone all recorded music and history whenever I want it, and I had to wait to go see live music and make that experience more special? I don't know. But then you also were saying we were just made to make music and community in general. And like, I mean, in my stereotypical imagination of like cave people, like banging drums, or I don't even know, just like this desire to make music is feels like the very first, it must have been the very first art form. And we don't have that we can't hear what like ancient music sounded like we can see the cave paintings, but
Yeah.
I imagine that that was like the very first type of creation that people were making.
Yeah. And how wild to um feel that free.
Hmm.
Like there's some sort of idea, and I think post-enlightenment, we've just all kind of decided we'll never hear something that is not iterative or that isn't like based in another experience we already had. Like also kind of like the scientific method of things. Like I experienced it, therefore it is real. Therefore,
Hmm.
the next time I experience something, it will also be real. And that like there would be something so special to not thinking I have the monopoly on everything I know to be true. And the thing, having the music on our phones doesn't help us philosophically because we do. We have our
Hmm.
hands on literally everything that's been recorded, which in itself is such a gift. Like
We're
that
not
is
like
so cool.
capable of, I feel like we're not capable of like have, appreciate, we're just because we're just so limited. It's not like I'm going to listen to every single thing and appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even if we could do that, would we know how?
No, I mean, I was able to appreciate music much more when I had CDs and I would treasure my favorite ones and then I'd save up money and go buy another one and I couldn't listen to all of them, but I had my favorite ones and then I'd be like, maybe I'll
Hmm.
get the next Britney Spears one, like for my birthday or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there was value to like there was risk and reward involved in that in a way that's like I think really primal that isn't involved in just being like, okay, Spotify, I'm gonna hit Britney Spears radio and see what happens to me.
Yeah.
Like
It's just like blah. It's just blasé. It's the background and yeah. Um, Getting back on the idea of technology, because I just want to hear your experience too as a composer. Like how have you been a composer for like 20, 10, 15 years? Like
oh
so
gosh,
you've
yeah, about 20. Yeah.
about 20 years, so you've seen there have been a lot of changes since then. And I mean, how has your life as a working composer changed due to technology? And like, is that why you're kind of stepping away from more film and TV work?
Hmm. Um, I don't know if it was consciously why I've stepped away a little bit, but I'm sure it has something to do with it. I think when I started out interning for Chris Hagen, like the amount of money it took me to be able to buy the technology and the
Mhm.
sample sounds and the equipment to produce something professional was a lot of money. It was like all my money all the time.
Yeah.
Now my students are able to make really professional sounding things with um, subscription services for their sample libraries with lesser tools. Like everything's kind of come down in price. So like buying Logic Pro even like that was like $1,000 when I had to first buy it. I think it's still probably kind of expensive, but not to that level. And so like being able to do it in your bedroom, being sort of like that bedroom composer idea is so totally doable now. And it was not when I started. So one of those things I feel that technology helped a lot of people, and I think that's great. I do find my own writing when I'm trying to write concert music. I will use technology, but to different extent than if I'm making something for underscore for Dateline or 2020 or something like that, where that's very visual for me. I can like I see in the DAW what I'm doing. I know the sounds I kind of want. Um, I can I can sort of chart that out. If I do concert music like that, it does sound robotic. And
Mm.
I will get in sort of this weird translation problem of like, but wait, this is how I know how to make music the quickest and the most efficiently. But like, what do I really want to say?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that the influence of technology is inextricably linked from whatever I make, because this is like the way using my computer has been the way that I've made music the whole time. So it's interesting when I try to do things that are outside of that, still involve, I'll go for a walk, but I'll have my voice recorder. So I'll sing an idea into the voice recorder that I'll bring back. And maybe I'll even take that exact, MP3 and put it in the DAW, but then I'll start playing, sample sounds around it, or I'll manipulate it in some way. And so, yeah. And then I put it in a notation software, and that's a whole nother can of worms for like how I'm using the computer to express myself using not necessarily an ancient form, but notation, has its roots in the last 1,000 years at least in a very Western music context, right? But like we've developed this language, and that, yeah, I don't know. Then I have to use this old language on this new software, and I have to like figure out how they would have done it in the past, but how I want to do it now, and how, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, or it's just meandering about.
No, it's very interesting, and it's interesting to even think about how your creative, like how the process changes what the final product is, and
Yeah.
if it would be how different it would be if you went the slower way, but also just the ease with using the computer, and that's like what you do. And maybe there's even a pressure now to be able to produce faster, and that really helps the process.
Yeah. Well, and I think with on the dawn of AI really stepping in, I think
Mhm.
again, like we're talking about sort of music as wallpaper. I don't think it's hard to train AI to make that kind of thing. I
Yeah.
think whereas like I have been making money off of TV that's cut together pretty quickly and can't hire just one composer. And so a lot of the stuff that I've written goes to a library where then music editors are able to just select it and put it in there. And then I make royalties on the back end of whatever they choose. That I think will go away. I think
Yeah.
computers are pretty able to do that. I think the less anxious among us are employing AI for their own workflow purposes and to help them create things. I think I'm so like not having it that
Mm.
I get exhausted even thinking about trying to integrate. I'm afraid to even use Chat GPT to help my grocery shopping and my menu planning, even though people have told me like, hey, here's a really amazing way you can use this tool.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
But
but
you can also do it with your own brain.
it will take me longer, but I did it myself.
Yeah.
And that's like something I value is the
Yeah.
process of doing it myself.
I think in some ways, it's like devastating to think about the having to be inundated now with AI art, AI music, and also so many livelihoods being taken away from artists. It's so devastating. And I also, um, whenever I feel sort of drawn in or tempted by like the ease of AI, and I've used it for various like kind of dumb grunt work tasks. It's not very good for creative stuff, really. And but like, can you translate this text or whatever? I like just kind of stupid stuff. And then what was I going to say? Um, I just feel this great sadness that comes up with. I don't know if any of this technology would even be functional or even have any sort of money-making capacity if it didn't rely on the stolen works of so many artists. It's unfathomable. Like the honestly the greatest act of theft in all of human history.
Yeah.
And now that kind of being spit out and vomited and taking people's jobs because it's just so heartbreaking. And also for it to be attacking the arts in this way, I understand if it's like coding or something very computerized and mechanized, but it feels like the very first thing that these um, tech people went after was the arts. And I don't know why that is, but it is.
I have a theory about this.
Yeah.
And it's probably too intense or hyperbolic. But I think the artists are the empaths. I think they were the
Hmm.
first people to say, like, I know so many music educators who don't make enough. They are feel lucky to be part of dual income households because they're not getting paid enough to be a music
Hmm.
educator to survive by themselves. Um, you know, there's people go into that profession motivated by something other than money. And so like I think the musicians and the artists, like you think of something like I don't even know what decade this would have started, but the idea of public art. Like,
Hmm.
hey, we as the city, we're going to commission a sculptor to do whatever they want and put it right here. And then we'll have all of Kansas City be able to come look at this sculpture, right? And that being like out of the empathy of wanting beautiful things for people and
Hmm.
making their lives richer because of the beautiful things around them. And I think that that is just so easy for this particular Americanized outlook on life to knock down as weak, as
Hmm.
as completely disposable, as just like a useless thing. And the sort of the robot is the thing now. Like we don't need any of that stuff. It was getting in our way. We need efficiency, we need novelty, and we need sort of like this continual feeding of it. And
Hmm.
and art just is not those like not those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's it's really too bad. And I was like I saw something the other day that was a Spotify AI artist, quote unquote. And I listened to some of the songs, and I mean, it sounded fairly realistic, other than the fact that it was a total ripoff of countless other artists in that genre and was totally soulless. And but I mean, if anything can be like a silver lining from this happening, it's just like we're gonna be forced to go deeper, and we're gonna be forced to really like be like, well, what is this art really for? Like you were saying, like what am I really trying to say? And the more superficial kind of like surface level stuff is clearly going to be the first thing taken by machines. But um, when I'm writing, it's the laziest, easiest thing for me to do would be go ChatGPT, like, I want to write about this. Can you like write me something, whatever? It's going to spit out something horrible. But let's say I did that and I was so lazy. It wouldn't really be um, giving, it wouldn't really be fulfilling what I'm trying to tell. Like, for example, I'm working on a screenplay right now, and I'm thinking, I started working on this story before AI existed, and it's very much about technology. And I was thinking, well, the reason why I want to tell this story is not purely for entertainment value. Actually, there's like something I'm trying to say, and no matter what the AI outputs, it's not going to know like what's in my soul that's trying to come out, that I'm trying to like create the environment to release. And it
Yes.
doesn't it doesn't know what's in me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is like that gem of like that we have to keep post enlightenment. Like this is the good thing, right? Like
Yeah.
your individuality is important. We need that. And a computer could replicate, you know, 700 other Enneagram sevens or whatever to do
Hmm.
whatever it needs to do sort of psychologically. Sure, but nobody can do it exactly like you do it. And that like how do we teach people that truth about themselves? This is my worry that like even teaching that has become less important so
Hmm.
that the average consumer is not really concerned about what they're looking at or listening to.
Hmm.
And I think, again, I think we see that discouragingly, politically, socially in a lot of systems. And it is really discouraging because yeah, yeah. How do you really teach that? I mean, I'm thinking of too, like having been in so many like composers workshops or like I think you're expressing something too that's probably talked about in writers' workshops of like,
Hmm.
there's this sort of je ne sais quoi of the thing that makes something
Hmm.
good that I can't teach you and you can't teach me. But when we both see it or hear it, we're like, yeah.
Yeah.
And we could discuss it for hours. We could be like, that thing went and then that happened and we'd be like so in awe of it. But like we can't exactly reproduce it. And I think musicians try to talk to each other about like that idea of like digging deep and soul and like what's your why behind this? Like what will give a good performance are all these things that like we can't teach you except to be self-reflective and learn
Yeah.
about yourself and hopefully learn about God and learn about like where you fit into that and your expression of the world in light of that. And so you can't teach somebody that, and it's all different for each one of us.
Yeah. And I think it comes through whatever the opposite of laziness is, which AI encourages you to just shut off your brain
Yeah.
and just really devote yourself to something. I mean, it's why that there's so many brilliant artists, but like, there may be a brilliant director and it's not every movie that he makes is brilliant because he's not, who knows? He's not putting his all into this other one or whatever. It didn't work. The magic didn't happen. And it's like it's the same with me. And I felt like I especially learned this when I started acting, because that's like the most, you can't force this at all.
Yeah.
Art form that
Yeah.
I've experienced. I think it's similar with music too, or any sort of performing art, but it's like you kind of have to put your all into it and let go it's yeah, if you try to force it, it's going to come across as forced and fake. And the most mad, like you can, and with acting too, like you can really feel it when you're watching a performance and somebody is really experiencing that emotion. We just are so attuned to that. And if somebody's faking it and just phoning it in, like it might be passable, but
Yeah.
the stuff that really captures our attention is like that person was like really going through something. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm watching them. And whenever I have had the experiences like that acting, I'm like, I'll come, I'll walk away and I'd be like, I can't believe I just let everyone see me naked.
Yeah.
I'm like, not
Yeah.
physically, but emotionally, because that's like, wow, that's what this is for. And if anything, maybe AI forces us to be more value that thing that's rarer, more and more true to expression.
I hope so.
Yeah,
I
I
hope
hope
so.
so. For
Yeah,
me,
and
at
that
least, it
yeah.
is.
Well, and I think
Yeah.
enough people still are like we will hold on to what we know art to be and we'll keep
Mhm.
doing what we do. And then it is kind of out of our hands. I love hearing about your reflections on being in flow state like that,
Mhm.
where you're like, I've done all the training, I did all the learning, I did all of like, the technical side of this, and now I'm allowed to just show up and let it happen,
Yeah.
and like it is it's exhilarating being in that mindset.
Yeah, and I imagine it's something similar when you're performing live music because I studied classical guitar as a kid and I just never like I was just never really a musician, and I remember my teacher was always trying to get me to like put your feeling in it or like imagine this and that, and it just something didn't click for me what he was trying to teach me, but I can sense it when I hear a musician really put their soul into something. What does that look like for you? I mean, do you play instrument? I can't remember if you play instruments or not.
I play instruments. I'm a
Yeah.
terrible performer, probably because this whole thing freaks me out. And I'm like, I would rather have the control of having written it by myself in silence and like make all my mistakes by myself before I like put it out there. But I think something that's where more of my life as a conductor comes into play of like, okay, like I've prepared this. I know enough about what I need to do here. Now I'm going to go just be with those people, and whatever happens to us, it's happening together, and
Mm-hmm.
we're going to make art. Like we're going to make something beautiful happen. And I'm going to be as present as possible to be able to respond to what they're doing, which is great because that does give me sort of the permission to not have to be the judge of myself.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, get to participate in this, again, in this like community oriented idea. Um, I, I, yeah, I love thinking about this sort of like that recognizability that I think is the great hope that we can have, hopefully, about AI, that even if it goes to the nth degree, someone will yearn to have one of those experiences again.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can, enough of us can keep that alive. That's all we
Yeah.
need is just enough of us to keep
And
that
to
alive.
not dumb think, not allow ourselves to be dumbed down. And this is constantly something I have to check in with myself. Can I read a very heavy, like dense book? Can I read a dense piece of literature? Is my
Yeah.
brain like, and sometimes I feel like I can't, but now I'm realizing actually this is really important to me to be able to like engage with really complex ideas and art form. And I mean, it's the same with music. I could listen to like the dumbest lowest denominator thing, or I could really try to like appreciate the highest form of art and know that. And I think you feel that in yourself too, even though it might be like a piece of candy to watch or read the dumbest thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't really like it's not very satisfying.
Mm.
Yeah.
This is this is sort of this thing again that I think um particularly evangelical Christians
Hmm.
focus on, but I find it one of their more beautiful attributes. This idea of
Yeah.
like there is this, the language goes kind of, there's this God shaped hole in your heart, and that there's
Hmm.
nothing that's gonna fill that. You can try, but it
Yeah.
will just be a cheap attempt. And until you realize that you're doing that, you don't have the power to surrender and say like, okay, God, you fill the the part of me that you made to be filled by you.
Hmm.
And I think art at its best can remind us of like that transcendent moment when you realize there is a power that is wanting to show you the love you always dreamed of,
Hmm.
and that you dare to believe is true, even for a
Yeah.
moment. And good art, you're like, oh, I believe it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I believe that love is real. And so we try, like, to be able to identify the facsimile, though, is a mental process that I think is both learned and taught. Like, I think you can learn it without being taught. I think people have an innate, like, spiritual curiosity.
Hmm.
Why, I think
Why am I
everybody is
here?
asked.
What's the meaning of life? Well, yeah.
Yeah. And maybe some have decided actually I'm not that interested in that question, and that's okay. But that like it that question exists for you, whether or not you were taught to think about that question.
Hmm.
By nature of being born and looking around and being like, what though? Like why?
Why is it like this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think even babies are trying to figure that out. Like why is there air now instead of this warm womb that I was in? Why is there like I think it's just always these questions of like I don't get, I don't get it. So I feel like art at its highest, what it's meant to do is remind you of that beauty of innate love,
Hmm.
that it exists and it's real, and that you can try and fill it with candy, and you may be successful for a minute, but there's something else, right? It may leave you asking,
Mm.
what else, so
Yeah. And it was making me think just too about your like relationship with art and community and how as artists you are kind of tasked with bringing your ego into it and making it all about you, and this is my art and this is who I am. And but when you're in the flow state, you're absolutely not thinking about yourself at all.
Right.
It's
Right.
a whole, you're like transcending your ego and your body, and ironically that's when you can create the best stuff. So it's just, it's really hard to have that balance when you want to create really beautiful transcendent art, and to just constantly try to get yourself to get out of that state of mind, stop thinking about myself. You also, this is what I learned in acting school, is like you can't be self-conscious if you're only self-conscious if you're thinking about yourself. If you're
Yeah.
thinking about your partner and what they're thinking and feeling, you can't be self-conscious because it's like almost like a narcissistic state of mind
Yeah. Yeah.
in if you want to think about it that way, to make yourself not be so self-conscious.
Isn't that such a weird
Yeah.
thing? And like kind of a product of learning to listen well too.
Mhm.
Is like if I'm thinking like, oh, what has Simone just said so that I can respond appropriately instead of like, I don't know what I'm gonna say. Let me fully like try to hear Simone so that I can
Yeah,
but
exactly.
like you can't plan to do that, really. You can want to be in flow state you know, we can meditate for hours and like really, really want to do it. We're not all the time in control of that. Like we can create conditions that maybe like, is that something you kind of deal with as an actor too? Is like, you can't really force it.
Yeah, I
Yes,
mean,
force
not
it.
every day you're not on your best game every day. That's just the reality. But then when you get those really transcendent moments, you're like, okay, this is why I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do everything in my power to try to get that again,
Yeah.
because that is the meaning of life right there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. This is what it means to be alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you see the role of music playing into like spiritual or religious practice? Because that's been a human universal forever.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I've had so many different music experiences in church. I, grew up in more of like a high church setting, so a lot of liturgy,
Mhm.
hymns. That was the place that I learned how to read music was in church choir. And then of course like school took that, but like I had already kind of like integrated into like this is a four-part hymn. This is what it looks like. Here's how you follow this line. And there's there's also like in my life I have experienced other like low church settings, so a lot of smoke machines, rock bands, four chord songs, Jesus I love you, love you, love you, love you, yay Jesus. And i have I have oscillated between like trying to understand that,
Mhm.
trying to understand what worship is, like what's its purpose, why are we bringing music in here, why can one person hear the hymn and be like, I'm bored, and another person hear the four chords and be like, this is trite, and how do we kind of like, is there a world where we can have, I think there's a lot of really thoughtful people working in worship music now who want the integration of it all. Like they want worship music, like contemporary Christian worship music, to be more involved and to help provoke the singer
Mhm.
into perhaps a different way of turning on their brain. Conversely, maybe the congregations who have been sort of just in this one musical bubble want to ask their congregants, like, hey, could we do this with these guitars? Like, would that be okay? Can we sort of weave those things together? And so like, and this is very obviously specifically in sort of like a Protestant Christian context.
Mhm.
In that's just been my experience with music in church. I learned to play in the pandemic. I learned to play the organ because there was a Catholic church that would let me in, and I didn't have to contact anybody. They just gave me a key and I could go play this amazing instrument. It was in
Yeah.
Utica, New York.
I
And
was just stalking your Instagram and was like listening to all your organ music. It was, yeah, it's just so beautiful. It just like hits you and you're like, ugh. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was such a powerful reminder of that time when we were so alone that like I could push a key and a bunch of air would just like surround, like the most powerful feeling. And and I I think I feel connected to Protestants and Catholics of yore, like Christians, who had these experiences in cathedrals and churches and could connect to something bigger than themselves, quite literally in taking in the sound. And I think that's something we're really trying to do. Like even if you look at like the more contemporary worship settings with the rock bands, it's loud. Like
Hmm.
they're really trying to like be like, hi, like there's an experience outside yourself. Um, but again, sort of this differentiation of like we're creating or manipulating an emotion to get you to be emotional, as opposed to we are creating a space for God's spirit to be present. And those are like really different
Mm.
motivators. And you can tell this typically in a church setting after attending a few times, either in any way, like whether we're doing like the very traditional things or we're doing new stuff. It's that same feeling of like I think people can recognize like when we're doing something inauthentically. And of course, people all have off days and they're like, I don't, the organist not every Sunday is going to be like, woo, praise the Lord. They're going to be like,
Yeah.
I need another cup of
I'm
coffee. I'm
tired. Yeah.
tired.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, and that's, I think, too, where we sort of count on God to show up, or sort of try to get out of our own way
Hmm.
and let music be whatever it's going to be that day. But yeah, I'm deeply interested in this, in how, I don't think in my current church, it's it's low church, but we weave in some liturgy every once in a while here and there. And so I'm fascinated. There is an attempt sometimes to bridge in some hymns with the more like contemporary music, and I think I've let go a lot of needing something to go a certain way in order to feel something. I think I like recognized in myself that I had that inclination to be like, oh, when I go to my sister's church, which is amazing and high church and this gorgeous organ. It's the church in Austin where Terrence Malick filmed some scenes for The Tree of Life,
Oh, that's
where
one of my favorite movies.
this does not surprise me at all about you, Simone. I also love The Tree of Life.
Yes,
It's
beautiful
beautiful.
movie. Yeah, beautiful
Yes.
church. That's so cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, this like sort of sense of like old reverence and quiet awe. And like that had kind of been my upbringing, is like wanting that. And I still do. But I have to ask myself, is this nostalgia? Is this about me? Is this about like my emotional needs being met in this? And then I have to like ask myself, oh my gosh, are you like a consumer here with your church experience? And then I have to like go through a whole thing with that. And it's it's like one of those things that I've learned to in the last couple of years kind of give up about, like be like, yeah, the music's gonna do what the music is gonna do, and I'm gonna go with it. And that's been actually a really freeing thing for
Yeah.
a music snob like me.
I'll just say one thing in terms of church music. Simon, my fiance, we recently did a little retreat at a local monastery, and it was a very strange, cool experience. But their whole day was centered around music and different services. I mean, there's the like actual church. It was like they were in the church like 5, 6 times a day.
Wow.
And it would start with the church bell, of course, and then you go in, and the only instrument they had was a harp, which I don't even remember the last time I heard a live harp. And there was just it was a very small church and it was simple, but he would just play this one monk would play the harp. And it was just there was just something so beautiful and humble about it. He would just play the harp and sing, and it was like it was something kind of dorky about it, but also
Yeah.
just really like I don't know, just lovely and simple and not trying to put on a show. And I just even remember he was singing very quiet, like they were all singing very quietly, like they weren't really singing for us to hear them.
Yeah. Yeah. That would have been remarkable to witness, I
Mhm.
bet. Um,
Yeah.
mm,
Just a different
wow.
example. But
Yeah.
okay, we've been like skirting around religion and everything and your church experiences and stuff. And I'd love it if you could go into just the beginning, like how you were raised and some of the history that you outlined when we talked earlier in your
Yeah.
childhood. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So I was raised in the Lutheran Church, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, which is important, I think, for locating me in a time of contemporary culture. I'll get to that in a second. But that's the church that I grew up in a small town in Iowa, and I loved it there. I loved my friends there. I loved all the church activities. I loved Sunday school, vacation Bible school, lived for it. Great times. I was I think I started going to summer camp in middle school. There was one because the ELCA is a global system of Lutheran churches. There were a lot of partner programs and other places in Iowa. There was this Lutheran Bible camp where like they had this very specific thing for girls called Pioneer Camp, and you slept in a covered wagon. What this
That's
had
so
to
cool.
do what it had to do with the gospel, I cannot tell you, but
That
like,
feels so 90s in a weird way.
did I want to sleep in a covered wagon? Yes, I did. And yes, I did it. And it was great. It was like the best week of my summer. But because of like my affiliation with that, I started being a camp counselor when I was in college. So I'd spend my summers coming back to that, not that particular system of Bible camps, but a different one in Iowa. And that was really interesting because my upbringing in the ELCA led me to like an ELCA college that also had this choir that it's like all of these
Yeah.
traditions and things that I loved and wanted to be a part of.
What is ELCA for people who don't know
Oh,
me?
yes. It stands for the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. And
Okay.
there are like 99, maybe more different sects of Lutheranism. And so Lutherans are really funny. Obviously, like we pride ourselves on being, Martin Luther being the leader of the Protestant Reformation and posting his 99 theses and be like, we got to break away from the Catholic Church. And so like sort of a spirit of
Defiance,
yes was
maybe.
always kind of a part of this, I feel. But the ELCA, I think, is the largest or maybe the second largest. I'll have to fact check this one.
Mhm.
But then there's also the Missouri Synod, and those are very culturally now incredibly different ways of practicing Lutheranism. And like the Methodist or the Presbyterians, the split has largely been about gay marriage and
Mhm.
about, so the ELCA started blessing gay marriage and then ordaining gay clergy. And that was like a really big break off point for people in the LCA who weren't going to go that route. And so then my home church was incredibly fractured by that split. And that happened when I was probably already in New York. So I'm going to say this is like slightly pre-Obama. So like that kind of era.
When people were really talking about this, like politically, then it became
Yeah.
people in the church were talking about it.
Yeah. Which is interesting though, like that's, 20 years, almost 20 years later, the Methodists have just made a formal statement and split their, I can't remember which sect of uh, Methodism exactly went for or against, but this has been in the mainline Protestant denominations, a huge schism. And I remember one being really important in my adult formation. So the ELCA does their split. College remains, affiliated with ELCA. The Bible camp that I was going to doesn't. And so then they are holding more traditional views
Hmm.
about marriage, sexuality, and a lot of other things that I learned about later in life. Sort of this younger term about the Bible, inerrancy, which has become a hot button for every American Christian to some degree, that the Bible itself is infallible. You can't cross it. You can't question it. Like this is God's word. God said it. I believe it. That's it, right? Which has more been used as a political cudgel than anything,
Hmm.
because actually nobody, if you question anybody about some of the things in the Bible, they're going to be like, well, that's not literal, or that's not what that meant, or
Hmm.
like, the Bible is so mysterious that like,
It's
you
also
can't,
like hundreds of different books written in different time periods and all this. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm perfectly comfortable saying this is what God intended for us to have. Every single word of it. I think that's probably in line with me. Like, I feel comfortable saying that. I do also hold that there will be pieces of scripture that, like, I can't understand, and that's okay with me. Like, maybe there's just answers that, like, we just can't have because there's more. This is a growing, breathing
Hmm.
document to be experienced and to be lived in. And so, like, that too, I think had a big part of like my college experience, felt like a lot of code switching,
Hmm.
where like I would be with the really conservative people and want to express my faith earnestly and authentically, but feeling kind of limited by language. I got in a lot of fights, actually,
Hmm.
theological fights with people at camp, and therefore they only let me work with like the little girls, which was fine because like the kindergarten girls are cute. They threw up a lot, but like there's a lot of mess that needed to be
Yeah.
dealt with, but I loved them. I loved
Hmm.
them. And so that was kind of like what would happen there is like I would try really hard to fit, but like not so hard that I wouldn't speak up, right? Like I would have these like conflicting things, and then when I would speak up, I would live in like just abject fear that I was wrong and that
Hmm.
actually I shouldn't be arguing, and that actually my biblical role as a woman was to be quiet and be smaller and be less, which was not true at all. But like that currency of this is how you do it existed in that space. Whereas at college, like though it was a Lutheran school and had certain rules, dry campus, those kind of things, I met a lot of gay people.
Hmm.
And that wasn't looked down on. I mean, there were still some schisms, I think, with individual people, but the ELCA as a whole had kind of decided we were moving that direction in full affirmation and acceptance. And so like that kind of carried on in my life, just like the two strains of thought being just so unwieldy with each other. And I when I got to New York City, it wasn't like anything like major happened. I had kind of found a church,
Hmm.
kind of stopped going, didn't really, and I would drift back in and out. There was an Episcopalian church, Trinity in Lower Manhattan that was just old, beautiful, historic New York City landmark, basically, with the cemetery where Hamilton is buried and like just very storied place. And I would go there sometimes, but it was, thinking of Portrait of a Lady uh, on Fire. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
But like that
Yeah.
idea, like I would go there just to be reminded of how small I was.
Hmm.
And they were an interesting group of people. They had a bus that was going to the Women's March. I remember in 2006, 17,
Hmm.
early 17. So I went with the Trinity women to the Women's March, which was great. So they had a hand in social justice issues, and I liked it, but I don't think I thought about God very much for a good 15 years. I think I was kind
Hmm.
of like I look back and I remember my times at camp being really fruitful spiritually, like when I was in college. And I remember that having a moment of standing outside the chapel by myself for some reason. I mean, I was always with the kindergarten girls, so like I was never by myself. But for some reason, I was by myself, and there was just this out of nowhere, like a gust of wind, and I just got shivers and I paused, and I just knew it, like I knew it in my bones. And that was, I think, one of the first experiences of being like, this is what people are talking about, of like sort of this knowledge without scientific proof or like continued.
Maybe even without words.
Yeah. Um, and just feeling so wholly loved in that moment was a really transcendent experience for me. And so I think then moving into New York City, like I found a lot of ways to try and to recreate that meaning for myself. I did a lot of yoga. It never quite worked, but I was breathing deep and I was
Hmm.
calmer than I came in. Um, but I think I spent a lot of time trying to make answers for myself, but still kind of asking people like, how does your life work? How are you organizing it? Like how do you find peace? I think that's what I was always asking people is like, how are you okay with being alive? Was always sort of the subtext of what I wanted to know. And I think it wasn't until I entered a romantic relationship where a lot of these faith issues were coming up. And from a person who had been raised in more of that traditional background, and I was like, I had to ask a lot of questions. It was like I had to ask, like, okay, I'm holding certain things to be true, but I don't actually know.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
then I took like a couple years to just like re-examine all of that, which was cool. I feel like I'm on the tail end of those years of being like that was awesome. Like my brain grew a lot, my heart grew a lot, and so it's been a cool journey kind of back. I think I missed actually like a lot of those 15 years. I think a lot of people in sort of elder millennial territory were leaving the evangelical church.
Hmm.
Um, and I think I missed a lot of that, like a lot of that, like church hurt or things where abuses of power and that's still obviously going on. But I was allowed to kind of come back in on the tail end of that too and watch a lot of not as many as I would like, but a lot of evangelical leaders start to re-examine like what it meant to be non-denominational uh, and practice Christianity in America. And there's been just so many cool offshoots of things that I've learned through that. And I'm sorry, that was a
No,
long.
it was great. So it's
Okay.
made me think of so many other things I can ask you because, well, something interesting about your story is that you were dealing with this like political schisms and people acting like they were so certain this was
Hmm.
right and this was wrong. And I mean, how do you like deal with people who feel so certain like this is the truth, this is the only way, like you're wrong, I'm right, where you were, in a maybe a more like place of humility, like saying like I this is what I believe, but like ultimately none of us can really know the answers to everything.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's interesting that you're reflecting on it that way because I think I had to look at my own need for certainty. Like, because especially like when I would get in these like theological fights, I was like, whoa, it's because I need to feel certain of
Hmm.
who I think God is and what I think is right. And then it's like the act of being like, okay, to love my neighbor well, I have to kind of put that down and be like, I can hold that you are needing this certainty for the same way I was needing the certainty, even if you can maybe not see it that way yet. That's okay. And I can still love you and we can still get along and I can examine my own pride in all this stuff coming up. Um, which I guess is like it still really bothers me. I was speaking with a friend who's just absolutely wonderful and she was asking, like she asks a lot, man's wisdom or God's wisdom? Like, what are you taking here from this? And like those political schisms are all based on man's wisdom of what we think God is. And then when you kind of try to back it up and be like, well, what do I like scripturally? What do we know about God? What do we know about the character of God? Then it's like helping it to kind of go back to a different place that's like not so much about us. but difficult. Like I think we just have a human need to fit, and part
Hmm.
of belonging or fitting in requires, I think, sometimes sort of these intellectual conformities where I don't think God's necessarily asking us of that. I'm not saying he isn't sometimes, but I'm not convinced that we all have to have correct theological doctrine to be beloved children. And in fact, that's, I think, pretty biblically substantiated that like none of
Yeah.
us are holding, the exact way, truth, or life. That was Jesus, and the rest of us are just doing our best.
We're all failed and or flawed is what I meant to say.
We're also probably failed
Yeah,
to some
yeah.
degree too.
And I feel um like yeah, I have my own moral beliefs that I feel certain of. I also feel like there's room to evolve, and a lot of us now are just in these very um dogmatic kind of political bubbles. You're either in one or the other, and you tend to not cross very much. So it's interesting you were kind of crossing in and out, and maybe it's just because you were in the church at a certain time period where like American life became so politically divided. But like I do find a lot of value in not just blinding yourself to whatever someone's saying or whatever your tribe is, or even having a political tribe. And I think spirituality and religious thought should go beyond that and shouldn't feel the need to conform to one of these false dichotomies that we've created in American life.
Yeah. What would be wrong with holding,
Yeah.
again, and this is the problem we're seeing as a country with pluralism in general. Like,
Hmm.
there's a section of the country that's allergic to it, where you're like,
Hmm.
but wait, we can't hold actual morality unless
Hmm.
we can hold the basics for that. And anyway, that's yes, what you're saying is so important, I
Yeah.
think. And just the idea that a man's wisdom versus God's wisdom. Like I remember when I was like, okay, I'm feeling called back to church. I'm feeling called to participate in it was after sort of that I had felt like, um, okay, Jesus, you're real and I can trust you. So like after sort of that sort of internal work, the next part was like, where is community?
Hmm.
Where do I nurture my soul in a group? And for a while when I was living in Washington, D.C., I was going to like three churches and they were all really different. And I loved it. I loved it because I felt like I was able to experience like, you know, not fully fitting in the beliefs of any one of them fully, but not
Hmm.
being, they were all Orthodox Christian, right? Like, so like not being without the ability
Hmm.
to fit in. And I was like, this is really the way I wish just one church functioned, right?
Hmm.
Like, and I think this is kind of the deep wish for a lot of people who do ecumenical work and want like sort of shared solidarity, even within our differences, is the ability to sit with each other and disagree, but not on our, important orthodoxy, but disagree on our second and third tier issues, but still be able to sit together and make decisions that we find reflect the kingdom.
Yeah. And I think like I mean for me personally, like I really enjoy talking to people who I disagree with, who are okay with like talking about disagreements without getting accusatory because I feel like it makes me smarter
Mm,
to
yeah.
hear from people who have different opinions and maybe strong different opinions from me. It makes me really have to challenge my own beliefs and be like, why do I believe what I believe? And yet I can still love and respect somebody who believes things that I think are wrong. How is that possible? I know that like human nature, it's doesn't want to believe that that's possible, but I do think it is possible.
I think it's possible too.
Mhm.
And I like that. I like that about
Yeah.
you. And I like that
Thanks.
about Simon. I think you're both just inherently curious people. And that like comes out in your own desire to grow and learn and not be appeased by the status quo. Even if at the end of the day you're like, yeah, my moral position on something didn't change, but I
Right.
learned. So,
And this, oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I
no,
interrupted
you
you.
go.
No, I was saying, and the status quo is always changing too.
This is important to think about.
Yes.
Yeah. And again, I think it goes back to like our desire for certainty, right? Like,
Hmm.
um, I can be so sure that I'm doing it right, and that gives me comfort. But that's not actually my put dying to self and following after my Lord. Like that is actually just me deciding that I can feel okay with myself. And
Hmm.
again, so it's like some of that process is necessary and good, and like learning to feel okay in oneself is a super spiritually important process. At the same time, if I become too focused on doing that, it's just so navel-gazy that I've missed the plot.
And a lot of like the moral questions I think people are having these days, and a lot of the political hot button issues, I think the media tries to flatten them into black and white, but actually it is a lot of moral issues it's hard to feel completely certain about. The reason they're so hot button is because they're often very complicated, or like it's hard to feel like a strong sense of certainty around it. Like I don't know, something that just popped into my head was like euthanasia, and I believe the Christian position would just be to is totally against it, and then other people have reasons that they think it should be allowed. Um, I and I and I just think, well, that's a really hard issue, and I can see both sides to it. And if I was to try to have some sort of stamp of like moral authority and moral certainty on it, you would lose a lot of the nuance and also just the discomfort of not knowing what is
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Oh, I think what you're saying is so beautiful because it's tying in again to this like everybody has a different story. And you're exactly right with the idea of like flattening things, like the media trying to flatten it, or people wanting certainty that will also flatten, like this is our moral position.
And
Now we
everyone
will,
else is evil.
well,
Yes.
they have to be in order for
Yeah.
the moral position to get us what we want. But if we're all like this great big kaleidoscopic moving thing, but still we're one. We're all humans, right? Like, but there's so many different angles you could look at it. And like, I had this idea the other day. I was thinking about like, how do I define humility? Um, and it's these ideas of like being humble or wanting to seek humility. Like we know it's a fruit of the spirit. I mean, it's something we should want. And I was
Mhm.
like, does that mean?
How do I get to be the most humble of all?
And I wonder sometimes if true humility is just being able to recognize when you are making a decision, uh, you as a human are making a decision that is godlike in nature and that
Hmm.
you should tread carefully. Like
Yeah.
that's all it is. It doesn't mean don't make the decision. It doesn't mean don't speak your mind, but it means like in a state of complete humility, you've done the checks and balances. You've been like, okay, hold on, because I'm not God, but I
Hmm.
want to make a decision that honors God. Did I do all the Jesus things? Like, did I check for the plank in my eye before I like dig at somebody else's little speck of sawdust? Did I like pray about it? Did I do all those things? Okay, now can I speak? And we have like not, that's not part of our process. We are taught to be great arguers. We are taught to be great debaters,
Hmm.
and to be ready to defend ourselves at any point in time. But like maybe that's what I'm thinking of just my particular experience. Like that's what being humble is gonna require of me. is a
Hmm.
longer is a longer process.
And the way that you express it is unique to you. If it's not apologetics, it's music, it's maybe not using words
Yeah.
as much, like you said.
Sorry, I did
That's
something. I got too
okay.
emphatic with my hand gestures and then I ruined my. Hopefully, Simon won't be mad. Okay.
I realize we've been talking almost 2 hours, but like I still have more questions, but I don't, if you're getting tired, oh,
No, I
okay.
could keep going. I could
Okay.
probably go for longer than you can. So you just tell
Okay.
me when you're like, this is it.
Okay.
We have too much to make into one episode.
Well, okay. One of my last questions about your belief was your maybe your period of coming into adulthood and not going to church and not really like thinking about God or spirituality. And I mean, how I would see it just observing is like maybe that is you coming into confidence in your own belief, like taking, you know, away some of the things you were taught in childhood and saying, well, what do I really believe? And can you talk a little bit about what happened during that process for you that you're now saying that you're kind of coming out the tail end of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Like, I think I like thinking about um, sort of the non-linear or what I imagine, um, or my theological sort of beliefs about the non-linear passage of time according to God.
Hmm.
That like for those years that I was like, actually, like all of this deserves examination, but I don't have the time, right? Like I don't, I want to live my life. I want to become successful at making music. I want to find someone to marry and have kids with, which is still a thing that I want. But I want to do all these things, and this is what I want my life to be. So
Hmm.
I'm gonna go make it. And what's fun about looking back is like knowing that like he never left me alone through that. Like I can see very specific instances where I was still kept safe, kept loved, kept protected, steered in the right direction. So it was still always like I think I was always captivated by like this the currency of love in any given situation. And I think that that is a thing that drives me towards connection with others is like when I can feel the currency of that. Even when I didn't have words around it or a framework of
Hmm.
Christianity to put around that, like that experience I can see was still happening. And the high value I've always had for friendship I think is of God and always has been, and the way that I learned to care for people despite really just a lot of like self-caring. But you know, I say that with sort of a cheeky grin too, because that was all part of learning to love too, is learning what does that really mean to love myself, to care for myself. Is it, is it this hour that I took for myself in yoga, or is it something deeper? That hour will cover me for the day, but does it cover me? Like, what else, you know? I'm rambling again, but this, I, I think what's changed now, and this has been a process of a lot of different factors, right? Of my own coming of age and understanding my gifts and what I have to offer, but also understanding that there's something bigger than me, so
Hmm.
that if I'm entirely forgotten, I can rest assured that the name Jesus Christ won't be
Hmm.
ever forgotten, and that like there is purpose for me even if I can't see it. And that like that's just so it's just so reassuring in a way that I I have been looking for. I had
Yeah,
been
that piece you were talking about. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And that feels like fun to be like there was this thing present since childhood that was kind of there all along, even if I said no to it, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I think um, Yeah, thank you for sharing. That was and being so open and everything about your beliefs. I really hope other people relate or they just like listen with an open heart because it's really nice to hear from you. And um, what is your what are your future plans look like and how are you thinking about your life right now as a musician or you yeah, just tell me about
Yeah.
what's going on for you now.
Um, I'm trying to discern maybe there is a path for me in formal ministry.
Hmm.
Maybe there isn't. But maybe there's just a world where I become um, like a 21st century version of Hildegard von Bingen, where I'm
Yeah,
just like kind of a crazy old nun
iconic.
who does some like crazy music and is like, I wrote this crazy book with these ideas, and everyone's like, okay. Um, that's to me, that's like, yeah, total icon, saint to emulate. That's what I want to do. But no, like it's a little bit, I don't think I could ever quit music. I think music I've got projects in the next couple of years that I need to complete and um, but it no longer feels like something I have to do or else. And so
Hmm.
I think there's room there and um I don't have many plans. So like that could be a good thing and I could, update you in a couple of months. Maybe I'll have
Yes.
other plans, but I'm staying despite things feeling like they're crumbling around me, I hold a lot of hope and excitement for just the ability to make new friends and talk to more people and have fulfilling afternoons of fun chats. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
and like the fundamental things that you're like in love with and that you're interested in, like nothing can really take whatever is happening in the world politically, technologically, like nothing can really take that away. Those are the eternal things.
Yes.
So it's beautiful.
Yes. That is so true and wonderful to like rest the mind on.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, JoAnne, for coming on the show. It was a pleasure to
Oh,
have you.
thank you for having me. This has just been so much fun. Thank you.
Thanks so much, JoAnne, for coming on the show. You can find some of her work on her website, joanneharriscomposer.com. Her name is spelled JoAnneHarris. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I'll catch you next time.